up, Taiwan? I'm Tiffany Wong with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has been arrested for alleged crimes against humanity. He was taken into custody on a warrant by the International Criminal Court as he arrived in Manila from a trip to Hong Kong. The ICC has been investigating him over his bloody war on drugs that saw an estimated 30,000 people killed and for a spree of extrajudicial killings during his time as mayor of Davao. Taiwan's stock market tumbled Tuesday morning following a major fall in U.S. markets. The sharp drop-off reflects concerns among investors about tariffs and a possible U.S. recession. For more on this, we turn to Chris Gorin, who's been following developments from our newsroom in Taipei. Chris, what has investors so scared?
Well, like so many global events these days, what's worrying people comes down to one man, Donald Trump. In this case, it's the effect of his economic policies that's got investors both in the U.S. and Taiwan scared. Taiwan's main stock index, the TAIEX, closed down 1.73% today, with tech stocks being particularly hard hit. Shares for chip giant TSMC, which tends to lead Taiwan's stock market, ended down just over 2.7%, while another major tech company, Foxconn, was also down just over 2%. Now, other of the major Asian stock markets are still trading at the moment, but they also appear to be down. So what's causing all of this? Well, a lot of people are pointing to a TV interview that Trump gave over the weekend where he refused to rule out that his tariff policies might lead the U.S. into an economic recession. Let's listen to what he had to say.
But are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition.
Can you give us a sense of whether or not we are going to get clarity for the business community?
Well, I think so. But, you know, the tariffs could go up as time goes by, and they may go up. And, you know, I don't know if it's predictability. I think
so that's not clarity.
Now, refusing to rule out a recession is quite a shocking thing to hear a U.S. president say, especially one who's presiding over what is otherwise a pretty good economy. Now, that interview broadcast on Sunday, and by Monday, investors in the U.S. were already reacting pretty strongly. All the major indexes on the New York Stock Exchange dropped significantly by the end of trading Monday. The Dow and S&P 500 both had their worst days of the year, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ had its worst day since 2022. And since Taiwan's stock market is also led by tech companies, that tends to have a big impact here as well.
So, Chris, is it only the threat of tariffs that's to blame here?
Well, of course, there's always a lot of factors in play. Tech stocks in particular might be reacting to the release of a new Chinese AI agent called Manus, which appears to be able to outperform even the newest tools from, the US AI giant OpenAI. But it's hard to argue with the fact that unpredictability is the main culprit here. It's not just that investors don't like tariffs. It's that Trump hasn't been clear about if or when such tariffs would actually take effect. One day they're on, the next day they're off. Businesses and investors tend to like stability and predictability. And with this back and forth on tariffs and his unwillingness to say that there will not be an economic recession in the U.S., that's not what they're getting.
Thanks, Chris. That was Chris Gorin with the stock update. Lawmakers are still fighting the cabinet over the slashed budget weeks after it had passed in the legislature. Legislators took turns questioning Premier Zhou Rongcai over the decision to send the budget back for a revote. It had already received lawmaker approval with the combined support of the opposition parties, slashing a record 6.6% from the original proposal by the government and imposing major freezes on funding. The budget is expected to pass the revote with no changes. The military is tracking service members who have taken Chinese citizenship. And as John Van Trieste reports, even conscripts with Chinese national ID cards now face scrutiny.
The military is on the lookout for soldiers holding one of these Chinese ID cards, a sign they've naturalized as Chinese citizens, and therefore technically lost their rights as Taiwanese nationals. China claims Taiwan and often threatens to invade it to bring it under control. And reports last month that a Navy member had a Chinese ID card set off an alarm, with questions about whether China could be infiltrating the military under commanders' noses. Career soldiers and officers must now declare and then give up their Chinese IDs. But there's a problem. Taiwan's military still relies on conscripts to fill its ranks, a harder and harder task as low birth rates lead to population decline. So while the military is also gathering info on conscripts with these Chinese IDs, it is decided that having one isn't an excuse to get out of military service. They may have lost their rights as Taiwanese, but not their obligations. This delicate situation has drawn reactions from across the political spectrum.
也请国防部来去做彻底的来彻查之外，那也去研拟一些相关的配套，来确保国家安全能够被守护。
我们也不要特别去预设立场，说这些有其他国家身份的役男都一定会去免费的去做所谓的间谍活动。
Meanwhile, those who understand the military's working say there are steps that can lessen the risk of spying or sabotage.
或许呢，可以让这些士兵从事比较单一的任务，譬如说你就是驾驶或运输，减少接触一下军事机密性。
Whether or not this is viable, the government is tightening security in other ways too. Civilian government employees must also declare and give up Chinese IDs. And within the military, rules are getting stricter. Anyone who signs documents or makes videos pledging allegiance to China could soon face up to 7 years in prison. The goal is to remove the risks of infiltration and make sure those who make their living serving the country stay loyal to it. Kama Xu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The U.S. is calling on North Korea to refrain from what it calls unlawful and destabilizing acts. That's after Pyongyang test-fired several missiles to protest annual U.S.-South Korean military exercises. With U.S. officials now labeling North Korea as a nuclear power, could there be another meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un? To answer that, our reporter Jaime Okan spoke to Jada Frazier, a security analyst with the Asia Group.
How important are exercises like Freedom Shield between the U.S. and South Korea in maintaining peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula?
It's not just having the treaty alliance that guarantees that. It's, consistently operating together, ensuring that there's, seamless interoperability between U.S. forces and South Korean forces. It's, ensuring that our, joint plans to respond to contingencies are actually being, put into practice. These are the things that are crucial to maintaining deterrence, both from a kind of, lethality standpoint and knowing that both countries' militaries can operate together to respond to a contingency, but also from a deterrence signaling standpoint, kind of, showing potential adversaries that, the U.S.-Korea alliance remains active, it remains strong, and prepared to respond to any acts of aggression.
How big of a priority is handling aggressions from North Korea in the sense that, its nuclear weapons program and its advancements in its weaponry, and now this new cooperation that Pyongyang has with Russia?
North Korea's growing alignment with Russia, including, deploying troops to support Russian operations, is really significant. It's something that the Biden administration kind of really picked up on, and many of our allies and partners in Asia are certainly concerned with this. Trump has made comments indicating a willingness to meet with Kim, and there's potential there for pursuing negotiations. But I would say that as it currently stands, the Trump administration foreign policy has really been focused on, Europe primarily and ending the Russia-Ukraine war. And then there's also, significant developments related to Gaza happening in the Middle East that are continuing to suck up bandwidth. So as of right now, I don't see the Trump administration really prioritizing its North Korean policy.
We're seeing that U.S. officials are labeling North Korea as a nuclear power. Is this because North Korea's capabilities have advanced? They're getting better, and they pose a bigger threat to the United States?
So I think, all of these developments really underscore that it's a very complex and evolving security landscape on the Korean Peninsula. And I think it will be, interesting to see how in this, second Trump administration, we're going to have a reformulation of U.S. national security strategy and national defense strategies that'll be forthcoming, and looking at how North Korea is kind of framed in and categorized in these documents compared to both the former Biden administration, but also Trump's first term will be important.
That was Jada Frazier, a security analyst with the Asia Group. A cargo ship collided with a U.S. military-chartered oil tanker off the coast of England on Monday. The ship was carrying toxic chemicals and the tanker had jet fuel on board. The crash triggered a huge fire, forcing crew members to abandon ship. Dozens have been rescued, though one is still missing. Search and rescue efforts have been called off, while those to determine the impact of jet fuel spilled into the ocean are ongoing. The cause of the collision is not yet known. Blossoming cherry trees draw crowds around Taiwan every spring when the country's hillsides are dotted with pink and red. But as the climate changes, these trees aren't handling it well. Rick Lauert has this story.
One of Taiwan's chilliest winters in years is coming to an end, and residents are flocking to the hills around the capital, Taipei, soaking up the sunshine and the first signs of spring, cherry blossoms.
就是走向大自然，这样看看大自然，放松心情。
差不多是冬天玩，然后就是迎接春天的样子。
台北最有名就是阳明山，应该是台北最漂亮的地方。
These cherry blossom watchers are part of a growing crowd in Taiwan. In this national park just outside the capital, Taipei, thousands of cherry blossom trees of different varieties flower every year between January and March, Taiwan's coldest months. It's one of a growing number of cherry blossom sites in the country, attracting hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. But not every cherry blossom forest is flowering as successfully as this one. Many of the trees in Taiwan were planted by the Japanese when they colonized Taiwan for the first half of the 20th century. But as these imports reach maturity, they are not doing well, unsuited to Taiwan's hotter and wetter weather. Tree doctor Zhang Fengchun has dedicated decades to nursing Taiwan's ailing cherry trees.
呼吸用的，这个呼吸空气可以进出的，所以樱花树很喜欢呼吸啊。
But she says climate change is only going to make her job harder.
面对我们现在气候变迁的情况之下，就不是每一棵樱花树、每一种樱花树就可以适应台湾的气候风土，所以往往有时候为了种而种，最后不到1-2年就会整个枯死或者说烂掉。所以现在很多公园里面，我们看到很多樱花树，说实在话，普遍的生长不良。
In a bid to grow more healthy, beautiful trees, people here are turning to new local breeds better suited to Taiwan's climate. And one farmer, Zhang Zhoufu, has developed a hybrid of Japan and Taiwan varieties, which thrives in warmer temperatures. He's even exported these plants to tropical Singapore. Taiwan's enthusiasm for cherry blossoms has come under criticism in the past. Decades ago, people replaced indigenous forests with cherry trees, impacting biodiversity and local ecosystems. Tree Dr. Jan says cherry blossoms should be enjoyed alongside other natural wonders of the forest.
尊重树木本身树性的原则，你要种它，你就必须要了解它，要共生。
As the planet warms and climate changes rapidly, Taiwan's natural landscape, like much of the world, faces an uncertain future. But understanding these trees beyond their aesthetic value could help them flourish and allow future generations to bask in their beauty. Luffy Li, John Su, Peachy Zhuang and Rick Lauert for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out these Bulgarian villagers showing off their horses on St. Theodore's Day, also known as Horse Easter. I'm Tiffany Wong. Take care and see you next time.